Hi, and welcome to the Unreal Engine News and Community Spotlight. First up, we have a new article about how real-time is the future by Ken Pimentel, and it discusses a number of different reasons why real-time improves and helps a lot of different industries and makes it just much more accessible and really amazing projects. So definitely go check that out. We also announced our Epic MegaJam results last week. We were super impressed with all the games submitted. We had a record-breaking 279 submissions. So if you didn't see those winners, there's a blog up that kind of recaps the jam, and you can actually go to the forum post and download a number of those games. And I do recommend going and playing them. There's a whole lot of fun buried on that page, so go check it out. We have our weekly karma earners for this week. So these folks are jumping on Answer Hub, answering questions, and helping support the community. And we just want to give a huge thank you to these folks. So it's Nachtmare, user 609571414, Shadow River, Jin VE, Every Nun, Unskilled, Firefly74, Redbox, Akkots, and The White Rock. So you guys, huge thanks. You rock my socks. Our first community spotlight is a game called Driftland, the Magic Revival. It's a real-time strategy game that went live just a few days ago. And it's just a really gorgeous game. I love the look of it. The idea is that you're this mage overlord, and you have your own castle, tower, and realm, and you're trying to explore this procedurally generated world and connect these floating islands to expand your kingdom. So it's just a great looking game. It's available. Go check it out. Our second community spotlight is this architectural visualization. So it's a real-time interactive architectural living room. And so you can go in, you actually update your floors on the fly, and you can change the colors of the carpet. One, this environment just looks absolutely stunning. They did a really great job just setting up the scene, lighting it, getting all their textures and everything squared away. But then to go in there on top of it and have all these dynamic aspects that you can change just is really incredible. So great job to the team working on that. And our third and final spotlight for this week is a project called Home. It's actually developed by 4 second-year students. Over the course of about 3 months, they made this scene, and it's kind of it's the idea that there was a malfunction on the surface of a beta colony planet, and so there's this bot that's left to recover their survivors and save at least some of mankind. But they did a really wonderful job. I love the colors and the lighting, and especially for a student project, it looks really fantastic. So great job to that team. They were part of the University of Hertfordshire. So you guys, keep it up. I can't wait to see the kinds of projects you do in the future. It looks really, really wonderful. And that's it for our news and community spotlight. Hey, welcome to the Unreal Engine Livestream. I'm your host, Amanda Bott, and with me today I have Tim Hobson, one of our wonderful technical writers. Welcome. I feel like it's been a little while since we've had you on.
It's been a little while since I've been on. So.
You want to discuss, give a brief overview of what you're going over today?
Okay, so what we're going to go over today is a little bit of creating your own light maps inside and outside the editor. What we're going to do is just kind of show you some good habits or like best practices, and then we're going to show you kind of some of the tools inside the viewport that you can use, like whenever you do create your light maps. It's like you can look at the density of them and and make sure that everything kind of seems in line with the scene. Yeah. And then I'll also look at some statistics windows and kind of show you how to look at the ones that take the longest for a lighting build, and how you can reduce that. It's like, so there's some pretty cool stuff I can show you with this that maybe you're not aware of or you may be aware of, and maybe to help with your workflow. So.
Excellent. That sounds great.
Okay, so we're going to jump right into the editor real quick, and what I'm going to show you here is, so really what is a light map? So a light map, if you're not familiar with them, it's a specific UV that is created for your static mesh, and it stores all your lighting and shadow information into a texture. So what we have here is essentially a laid out light map, and it's like all of our geometry. So the big thing like with these is that, you know, all of your faces on your geometry has to have a unique space on the light map. So one thing I do want to show here to go to my next little section. So this is taken straight from our documentation. I got a bunch of images. I think they're really good examples to kind of show for custom light maps. So right here with this building little facade that we have, or, you know, modular mesh that we have, you can see here in the top we have our texture UV, and it's not really conducive for what we would create for a light map because we have overlapping faces. You tend to do things like that with a texture because, you know, it's like everything's going to be laid out in a certain way, and you may lay that out differently than like a light map. So it's like this is actually taken from like 3ds Max, so it's like behind it here we actually have the texture overlay where our UVs are going to be. So down here on the bottom, what you can see is the 4 sides of this mesh have been kind of laid out into something that makes sense for the actual geometry to look like that geometry. And then there's like some areas like for maybe the top caps or the bottoms, and like some of these little grooves here in between that are recessed that have been broken out into their own little areas here, and they've got their own little padding between them. The idea here is, like, again, you want to separate the geometry and lay it out in a fashion that makes sense for a light map UV. So move to another image here for a second. Oh, why'd that open with 3D Paint? Sorry about that, 1 second. Let me just do this, scale through them. Okay, so what this one is another similar mesh. Sorry, headphone issues for a second. This is another mesh, so, and we're going back and we're looking here, it's like, you know, this is a front little face or whatever, and it's like, we're laying everything out in a contiguous kind of way where everything is connected that makes sense to connect. So you can see here, it's like some of the sides have been connected here, we got our front faces here, and then more sides, and then we've got a padding area in between from what our bottom cap or our top cap would actually be. And the reason for this is we want these areas not to bleed over into these other areas and cause any kind of artifacts. So, let's see here. And the padding between all of these should be at least like 2 pixels. And I'll show you some of this like once we actually get to creating some inside the editor, because like our auto-generating tools actually does a good job of like padding correctly based on the light map resolution that we choose that we want to pad for. But the idea with any light map is to connect the faces that make sense connecting in a good way. So I'm going to show you a couple more examples here on you know, anything from like a simple object like this to something that's more complex. And so as we go through this, all right, was it not going through now? Okay.
Is it being grumpy?
It is being grumpy. All right, let me see if I can open it in this other one. Sorry about this, 1 second.
There we go.
Okay, I had to open another one. Okay, so this is like another simple mesh. And again, we're showing the texture UV that we have laid out here on the left or in the middle versus like our lighting mode on the far left, our textured model, and then our texture UV where we would lay out. And then on the far right here, this is what we would ideally do for a light map if we're creating a custom one. So again, everything it's been kind of contiguously flattened out and laid out and connected where possible. And then we got some areas, so it's like you see these little recessed areas in here. We know that we don't want these to ever have any light bleed from like this main mesh. So what we do is we separate those pieces out so that everything it keeps the lighting information separate, and it darkens those areas without any bleed over from this contiguous mesh. And then moving on. Oh, this is, okay, there we go. I think it was zoomed in on the other one, and it won't let me zoom and scroll through the
Gotcha.
things. So this one's getting a little bit more complex. So we have a lot of geometry here that has a lot of negative space. So we get these little thin circles here, and you know, it's like a lot of clear area that we can see through. And it's like we can see our light map down here. This is like a 32 by 32 resolution light map or baked lighting scene. And then what this is our light map that has been laid out. I'm going to zoom in up here, see a little easier. And some of these faces have been contiguously laid out in a way that makes sense. And then it's like we have the back faces here for like the back side of this model. It's like they haven't, there's not a really good way to kind of contiguously have like all those without them creating some kind of overlapping faces. So you may also notice is like some of these aren't exactly like a 1-to-1 ratio for the way that things have been laid out. They've been squished a little bit, and if you look at like the far right over here, we got the 3 little column for the rails holding up everything. Like you can see there's some like distortion and stretching the way these have been laid out, and that really doesn't matter for a light map, especially if you're creating like a custom one. It's like all the lighting information gets baked in properly. The biggest thing you need to worry about is like getting everything to have coverage. So you don't want like these thin little pieces. Like this right here may not store as good of lighting information as something else that has been stretched and skewed a little bit more to have more face area in our light map.
So would you typically actually scale those up so that they can have some more information available?
Yeah, I mean, depending on a lot of that would depend on like the light map resolution that you're going for. For instance, like if we say like this railing here and it's in a game and we know we're walking down a path and we're never going to see that back side of the railing. So this side right here is like, you notice it's a little bit more squished than these top pieces here that have actually been laid out in a contiguous kind of way. That's because we're never really going to see that. So there's really no reason. We want to make sure it gets some information, but it doesn't have to have all the information. So, but like some of these other areas, like the beam, you can see that that has been unwrapped in a way that's just like one big giant triangle, and it just gives us like a really good layout for everything. So, let's see here. Unzoom and go to the next one. So here's another. Oh, I keep having a problem with my earpiece. Sorry.
They're asking if you can solve that problem with having more than one light map.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, you can't have more than one light map per mesh.
Okay.
I mean, you can break every mesh up and into multiple pieces. So it's like, for instance, like let's just say something like this. I'm not sure exactly what this mesh was originally used for, but to me it looks like, you know, one of those girders and things you would see like over a road.
Right.
You know, something that's really big, right? So if we look at this is a really densely packed light map in here.
Yes.
And it's something that you kind of have to figure out how you want to trade things off, because you can always up the light map resolution, which I'll get more into a little bit later. You know, but then you're paying a higher texture cost that has to be, you know, managed. Or you can break it up into separate geometry, and then you're having to worry about, you know, multiple pieces of geometry. So it's like there's trade-offs for it. And always remember, it's like, you know, even though we're looking at the lighting view here, and you may see some artifacts by, you know, it not maybe getting the best coverage on some pieces, but what your trade-off here is you can use textures to cover a lot of this stuff. Once you add detail maps for normal maps and things like that, it'll cover some of these issues as well. It's just a matter of making sure that the geometry in here gets the right coverage that it needs. But yeah, it's like this is more of a complex one. It's like, I mean, it's possible that you could break it up into multiple pieces if needed. Excuse me. Okay, and then going into like my last little one here that I want to show for like a complex style mesh. And even though this isn't like super complex, it's more organic. So it's like a lot of things have to be laid out in a certain way. But just going back to zoom in on top here. So we have this geometry here, and if we look at it, it's like we've got a couple of areas that we can kind of break this mesh up into a way that makes a lot of sense, and just kind of lay it out. So if you look at the center column here, that's been laid out in just like a straight triangle instead of something that's more 1-to-1 ratio and representative of the actual piece of the mesh, like where you know have those curved faces. Again, it's a light map, so it's like we just want to make sure that we get the most coverage out of our UV space as possible here. And that's like, and then you got the base, it's kind of been flattened out. And I'll show in 3ds Max real quick too some of the, you know, some of these concepts of how to do these. I'm not going to go into super detail just because like we have a lot of different modeling programs, and they all have similar kind of tools. Like Blender I know uses some similar things. Maya's pretty similar. Yeah. So it's like just to give you some of these concepts of how these things work. I think that was all for those. Let me move over to 3ds Max real quick. Okay, so I don't have any like complex mesh I'm going to show, but it's like I just want to show some of the basic unwrapping tools that we've got. So I've already just created a simple box mesh, and then added an unwrap modifier. So as you open it up or whatever, it automatically goes to whatever texture UV that I have. So within Unreal, we always typically the default light map is UV channel 1. So I'll do everything there, and I see a lot of people do this like flatten mapping. So, oh, okay, thought it froze for a second, but so with a flat map, all it's doing is taking all the geometry that makes sense, like where a seam cut would be. So we got a box here, 6 sides, and it just separates all of those sides individually by doing flatten mapping, and that's not the best way to always go. Yeah, we get a lot of coverage with this one, and it kind of makes a little bit sense, you know, to some degree. But there may be opportunities to do something a little different. So it's like, let me create a sphere real quick, and I'm just going to show you. And then as we do an unwrap modifier, it's like, so this is like just the basic default, but it's like if we do a flat mapping on that, it's like you can see how everything just kind of breaks up into this random geometry and doesn't necessarily make sense for a light map. And then that just kind of goes back to this right here, where you would cut these seams and that makes sense for your geometry. So for maybe something like a sphere, it's like if we had like a center line around it, you know, for some kind of bevel or whatever. Mm-hmm. That being an inset, you can kind of cut a seam there, and then you can kind of flatten everything out to look like these UV charts here. But let's see here, make sure I'm not missing anything. Sorry, a bunch I wanted to cover. Okay, so I'm just going to close 3ds Max for a second here. And we're going to jump right into Unreal, and I'm going to show you. Okay, so I'm going to grab my, so I have a bunch of little props I just kind of grabbed from different projects. So it's like, for instance, like this one's from the Showdown demo that we have. This one's from Sun Temple, and a couple from Sun Temple. And it's like they have some different kind of layouts that you can locate these projects and these assets and just kind of grab. Nothing complex about them. If we look at the UV that's been laid out here for this little newspaper bin, it's like everything's kind of laid out in a way that makes sense. Mm-hmm. To get a good bake. So what I'm going to show you first is our auto unwrapping tools that we have in the editor, and these are really good for a lot of really, like, it's really good to use like custom light maps for some things, like let's say if it's like a hero project or something that has like a very specific way to need to be unpacked. That's totally still a really good valid workflow. It works really well for like, you know, some ArchViz projects, but it's like, you know, you may run into like some things like where it's like you just need to unwrap it and just kind of get it in there and get a light bake, and you don't care about like cranking, you know, your light map resolution way up. You know, it's like you can get away with some really cool stuff. It's like Epic's own internal workflows. Like we use the auto unwrap for a lot of stuff too. So, so to show you how to use that, so I've got an asset here. I've got the UVs enabled, and what you'll see here is it says showing UV channel 0, which is the texture UV typically. And what I'm gonna want to do is go over here into the build settings under the specific load 0 or LOD 0. I always called it load, and it's like people.
They make fun of you.
Yeah, they make fun of me for it.
Bullies.
School taught me wrong. I've never lived it down. So okay, so let's see here. Sorry. Okay, so we go to generate light maps. If this isn't already enabled, what you can do is you can just click this little checkbox, and then what you get here is you get your minimum light map resolution. So what this is saying is this is the padding that we want to give between each UV chart that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So this is our I would say our lowest target resolution that we want to target. Because keep in mind, you know, it's like as an artist, you know, you may want to crank all these up and say, oh, it's like mine always needs to have a 1024. It needs to be, you know, this amazing thing that looks amazing, you know, when we bake lighting, and never have to worry about it again. But your level designers may go or texture budget is way over. We need to get that back down. So I'm going to set all these to be a really low light map resolution. But then what you create there is like, because you've targeted a higher one,
Yeah.
and you're using a lower actual light map resolution, you get a lot of bleed artifacts because it doesn't adhere to that padding anymore the way it should. So my recommendation is always to use the lowest one that you think would be for your project, just to make sure that you do have that padding there. So for instance, like this one's set to 128. The next thing we're going to do is the source light map index. What this is it looks at all the light map or all the UV channels that are available to our mesh. So we can click up here in UV. This one already has a light map that's been previously made. But if, let's say for instance, if you had 3 or 4 different UVs by chance, you can choose whichever one that you want to base the repack off of for the auto-generated light map. So I'm just going to go with the texture UV that we have here. And then our destination light map index is the one that we want to target to create it. So typically that would be set to 1, but I mean you can easily set it to 2 or whatever if you have other kind of fancy things that you're doing with your UVs, and maybe you've already created a 2 that you don't want to overwrite. So since there's already 1 here, I'm just going to do that real quick and show you how that works. So once we go to apply, we'll now see, do it. Well, whatever it did, it wiped, got rid of my UVs. It didn't add the extra one that I wanted. I don't know why that was, but okay. Regardless, I've got UV channel 1 here. I'm gonna set that to UV channel 1, and that's gonna, I'll have to figure that out later, but that's gonna show me the repack that's happened based on this texture UV. So as you can see, everything's kind of being reorganized and restructured into a way that makes sense for the repacking algorithm. So it's like we get some things, if you remember, this is like the front of the news bin over here, and you can see it's like it knows that it can pack a little things in here a little bit tighter, so it goes ahead and just packs them on in there, and these faces that don't have any geometry. So once you do that, this doesn't actually set your light map resolution for your mesh. This doesn't automatically assign it to channel 1 unless it already had a light map previously. So it's like once you hit apply, you'll need to go down here to general settings, and what you'll see is light map resolution. So it's already set to 128 for this one, which is good. It means it's not lower than what I had set for my minimum resolution for the auto-generated ones.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You sure?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, and as I had said, so our next setting is the light map coordinate index. This tells our asset which UV channel we want to use as our light map. So right now, as I said, it doesn't auto set it. So it's like you see here it says 0, which is what it was previously. So we'll set that to 1, and it'll switch and use that one going forward. So just another thing, just to show you real quick here. So if we change, because I just want to show the different resolutions. So as we do, like, let's just say a 512, we've cranked it up a lot, and we repack, you see it'll move things around again, and it's made everything much tighter in here with much less padding. So if I use a lower one, what you'll see is we get much more padding between each of these UV charts, just to make sure that we don't have any of that light bleed or any shadow bleed coming between any of them. So, has there been any questions on that, or anything kind of coming in as I move to the next thing? I'm just kind of curious. Or if you have any questions, no?
They seem following along so far.
Okay. All right, so we'll close that for a second. And then make sure. Oh, you know what? I'm going to show one more thing with the auto UV packing. So let me look at an asset that I brought in myself. I've got several devs. I'll be showing it at some point. Okay, so this is a simple box. I created, let's see here. I created a UV for it originally. And you can see here, it's like I just kind of stretched, unfolded it, and put it out there. So one thing you can do if you create your UV outside of UE4 and import it, and you just want to repack it, you can actually do that as well by going back to these generate settings. Just making sure that generate lightmaps is enabled. You can set the UV lightmap resolution for your lowest target that you want to have. And then for your source lightmap index, you would just set that to whatever your custom lightmap UV is that you imported. So in this case, it's 1. And then I'm going to use my destination as 1, so that way it overwrites it. And then in case, I've done this before, so just give it a new resolution there, so I can get my apply button back, because it was already 64 units spacing. And I think it showed it a little bit like where it actually just kind of like scaled it up to fit. But let me do this. Let me do 32, because that'll give me more padding around the edges. And you can see how you can repack one that's existing for a custom UV that you've already created. That way, I mean, these tools, while they're not as flexible as like something like 3ds Max, where you have like these whole like suite of editing features, you can still use this auto-generated method to work with your custom lightmap workflow as well. So let's see here.
So they're asking, is it better to use a low resolution when creating the light map? But then what about changing that resolution using override? It then increases the bake times in quality.
I was actually going to cover that in a little bit section, because like the next section I'm going to kind of go over is the editor viewport, and looking at like how these changes with the light map actually are being affected, like with our light map density and things like that. So, so I think I'll answer that one for you. If not, just
so we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. It's coming right up, I think. Okay, so light map resolution. Yeah, that's actually the next section I was getting to. So again, I have a basic little scene here. I just built lighting on it. It's not anything complex, obviously. I think I moved some objects, so it's got to rebuild, but not a big deal. So if we go up here and we go to our view mode, and where it says lit, we can actually click on that and we get our view modes. And we go down to this one that says optimization view mode, and then we can hit light map density. And you'll see I have a lot of craziness going on here with colors. So generally, like whenever you create your scenes, and I'll show a scene in a second. Actually, you know what? Let me go over that first, and then I'll show this. Okay, so this is a scene I took from Infiltrator a little earlier today. So this is just a normal lit scene. This is with just a lighting only view. So there's two views that I use personally, like whenever I'm working with light maps in a scene. I use a lighting only view, so that way I can see any lighting that's been baked and see where my errors kind of happened. If there are any errors or anything like that, and just make sure everything looks consistent. And then I use my light map density view mode. And what you see here is you get, depending on the size of your light map resolution, will determine how the color is in the scene. So in this one, you can see there's a little bit of red where maybe this UV chart is getting more resolution than the ones around it in that specific UV for that static mesh. For some of these pipes over here, you can see they're green, so they're going to be a little bit higher resolution than the blue ones are. The blue are going to be your low-end resolutions. And then you may be wondering, like these brown kind of yellowish ones over here on the side, any movable object in the scene is going to be lit that way because there's no reason for it to have a light map. They're typically like skeletal meshes and things like that. So it's like anytime they're set to movable, it's out the window. Don't need them.
We're not going to worry about that.
Right, exactly. So, so one thing I'll show here is we have our light map density that I've gone to, and it kind of breaks down all these colors for everything. So if we go over here, and someone asked about the light map resolution specifically. So if I go and I override my light map resolution, one, it's going to force me to rebuild the scene. I can already see that because it says, 2 unbuilt objects to the one that I already had that I had accidentally moved. But what you see is it automatically updates and shows you that, wow, this is really not in line with the rest of the density in the scene compared to the other objects. So, and you can see that the light map for this one specifically as well is like you get a lot of green, you get a lot of red, not really any blue. But that means that these little side pieces, when the UV was originally laid out, that was stuff that was given more density than some of the other UV charts that were laid out. So that's something to always consider when you're laying out your UV charts as well, is to make sure that everything is kind of in line with itself. I use, I'll show this real quick. It always goes to paint, I don't know why. This is one that's like I found online. It's a little UV helper. I typically put it on my meshes, and I just kind of can see what they look like as far as like the UVs, and I'll always look at UV channel 1 because it can show where stretching is happening, and it kind of gives me more of a frame of reference based on the numbering and things like that, like where I should be tightening things up. I think this little statue that was taken from Sun Temple is maybe a good example of like maybe needing to go back in and relax some areas, because like down here is like these are all part of the same UV chart, but when we're looking at our light map density view, you can see it's got this little checker, and these blue areas mean that that's getting a lower resolution than these green areas, and then same for some of these areas that maybe aren't so bad, but it's like, you get those little spikes where it starts to go red, so that means that's getting a higher resolution. So like this shoulder would probably be a pretty bad area, if it wasn't covered by like a good normal map or texture, it's like there might be something there that could be caught.
Right.
But let's see here. What was his question originally? I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything on that. Sorry.
It was.
Well, I just kind of.
So he's asking about, is it better to use a low resolution when creating the light map, I think in general, but then what about changing that resolution using the override?
So.
And does that increase the bake times? And
oh, yes, it does. Okay, so I'll answer both those questions. So the override one, I would say typically let your level designers, like this is where, depending on what your workflow is and how you create the asset. So if your job as an artist is to create your asset, get it into the editor, and set a light map that you want, and I would say set it to the lowest resolution you think is possible that still gives a good idea of what you want to target. Mm-hmm. And then this is where I was kind of getting at as well, is like if your level designer decides, hey, you know what, I don't need these really high resolutions that are coming in, and I'll show this window in a second, but I'll just show you real briefly to give you an idea. There's some ways that your level designer can use the level. So it's like we have this one option for lighting build info and static mesh lighting info. That kind of gives a breakdown of the scene of what took the longest to bake and the light map resolution that has been set. So they may just say, is like, for the entire scene, I want everything just to be much lower resolution, so that way we don't have such a high texture budget coming in for just light maps. So what they can do is they can override, and I would say only override like for your levels, because if you override in a mesh, you're always having to go back to that mesh and change it, but that asset can be used in multiple levels, right? Mm-hmm. So you never know where it's going to be, and it's like, depending on the scene. Again, you may just need it to be lower in this one, but not in every scene.
Gotcha.
So I guess that makes sense, right?
It does.
Does to me.
Yes.
All right, so yeah, so it's like, again here, it's like once you override, you can see that it automatically updates your scene, and then you have to rebake objects. So let me go to another scene I've already built lighting for, and then I'm going to show off that statistics window a little bit more. Let me make sure to find my windows. So that one.
You have so many maps and things tucked away.
Yeah, I had a few I created. Okay, so this one I'm going to show I'll show that baked information real quick, but I'm also gonna. So you'll see. So for the lighting density that I have for this one, everything is kind of in the blue range. Generally speaking, you want everything to kind of stay closer to the same kind of thing. And there's actually a little plugin that I'll show you later on that's I'll talk about, and at the end of this, it's really cool. That's helped me in the past. But there's most everything's kind of blue. It's like I've cranked up the light maps on these when I was doing, because I'm gonna show coverage in this one. But let me show the statistics stuff real quick. All right, so if we look at this one, we can see immediately. Let me go to static lighting build info. I might need to rebuild that real quick, but I'll talk about this. So we look at the floor mesh, and we can see the light map resolution is 128 for each one of those. You can see what the texture resolution is going to be. I think it actually is the other ones. The lighting build info is the one that's a little bit more in line. So what we can see here, oh, I clicked on it, is how long it took for each mesh to build in Lightmaps. So if you were to override a lot of those light maps and just, let's just say, crank them way up, or you had a high light map resolution to begin with, those are going to take much longer to process than any of the other ones. So as you can see, it's like I've got the longest ones in here is my one that says floor min coverage and one that says floor max coverage, a couple of seconds each, or milliseconds each. But then, like, let's say if I did like the statue and I did that at 1024, that thing's going to take, I've had some that have been like 366 seconds, depending on like really high light map resolutions.
Yeah.
So this is something your level designer and even you as an artist can take and look at and kind of see, okay, I've got this really huge scene, it's taking me everything to bake, or I've got this really small scene, especially from like ArchViz, because they do these really amazing things in light mass, and their baked lighting. It's like that example you were showing off earlier was amazing. It's like this can show you like what's your troublesome mesh, because it may be just one and not everything in the scene, even though it seems like it's just taking forever and I don't have much here. But all right, so I'm going to go back to my lit view. Actually, I'm going to go to my lighting only view, because I only want to look at the light maps, light bake. So one thing I did want to show is, like, I made these two meshes, and I'm going to open them up and show you. I have one called, and I want to show why it's important to have good coverage in your light map. So what I've got here is I've got two floors and two walls. These are the same meshes here. It's like, so this is main coverage on the left for the floor, and then max coverage up here on the top, and then both of these are max coverage. So I think what you can immediately see is like there's some quality differences here between these two, and they're both using the same light map resolution of, I believe, 64 each. So, but what you can see is, in this example, you can see it's all pixelated. It doesn't look really good starting out, and then this one on the wall looks much better at 64 light map resolution. So if I open up the light map UV that I have for that one, you can see I've scaled down that floor UV for the light map to actually only take up a very small space of that 64 by 64 texture resolution. So I'm not getting the full coverage that I need here to show a good quality result. Whereas in this one, this is the max coverage, and it's like I'm using pretty much that full space with a little bit of padding around the edge, not much, at a 64 by 64 light map resolution. So depending on the objects that you have and things like that, you'll want to make sure that you get the proper coverage in the proper areas to get the best quality without having to crank up the light map resolution. Light map resolution to me is like one of the later things that you should be worried about. Like, make sure you have a really good UV set up and laid out. And sometimes this can just be going back and forth a couple of times between whatever your DCC tool is and everything else. So it's like, then let's see here. That's pretty much what I had on that. I did have a couple more quick things I want to go over that are kind of like some things that help you find some errors with light maps in your scene. So I've got another map here. Let's see here. sorry, UV coverage, no. Maybe it's this one. Yes. Okay, sorry about that. So I made a couple of boxes, and I'll open up these and show you. So there's a really cool thing that you can do. So if we go in here to lighting quality, and we set it down to preview or medium, this enables this use color coding or error coloring, sorry, mode. And what it does is it gives you these error colors depending on the type of error that happens in your light map. And it only happens in that medium and that preview view mode. So if I open up this mesh, which is the one on the right here with the orange coloring, I can see that my light map has a lot of overlapping going on here. Mm-hmm. And that's strictly just kind of calling out like, whoa, you know, you've got some overlapping going on here. You're not going to get proper lighting results. So everything's going to look kind of janky. So, yep. And then this other one is going to be a wrapping example. And what we get is anything that is extended outside of our UV space, or 0 to 1 space, is going to be flagged as wrapping. So it's going to be marked green. So it's like you can see here how everything is pretty much green except for like this one face that was included in the UV space. So that's a neat little method if you're not quite sure. The scene shouldn't take a second to build. So it's like if I rebuild without the error coloring, let's see what kind of should show the errors. Yeah, well, while that does that real quick, I'm used to having like Swarm on my computer, so it just goes real quick.
Taking all the other computers.
There we go, apply lighting build. And then your map check will always come up and tell you, it's like, okay, object has wrapping UVs or it has overlapping UVs. So if you're not sure which meshes, I mean, it tells you the mesh there, but it's like if you're not sure, like maybe it has like a little bit of overlap somewhere and it's like not major, you can enable that error coloring and kind of see what's going on. But yeah, these are kind of some of the artifacts that you can kind of expect when you get significant overlaps and wrapping UVs kind of happening. Because everything's got to be laid out uniquely. So the one last thing I've got here before we kind of jump into questions, if there are any, is to look at, developer tools. We're going to go to the output log. And then your level designers can do this. So we have a command called dump. No, not that one. What was it? Dump lightmap size on disk. Let me clear that out. There we go.
So what was the command?
It's dump lightmap size on disk.
Okay.
And then what you get here is like, this is a very small scene, so it's like we have a couple of things here, like where it breaks down in kilobytes, our light map data that's being used. There was one other thing I did totally gloss over. So I think I've seen people ask before, it's like, okay, it's like, can I edit or look at my light maps in any way? And it's like, you can't really edit them, because what it does is it takes the whole scene and does it. So it's like, it's not a light map that's being stored for each individual mesh. Okay, this is laid out a little different than mine. World settings, there we go. So if we go over here and we get a light mass, there's an option down here for light maps, and what we can do is we can pop this open. I'm just going to disable alpha so we can see a little bit easier. And what you get is you get a breakdown of the scene. Since this has got some error coloring and stuff like that, probably don't see the things. Let me actually open up this one because it had more unique geometry. So if we open up the world settings here, go under light maps. It's saying 0 because I didn't rebuild. Man. Good one, I did rebuild.
Yeah.
Well, depending, I mean, okay, so everything, like whenever in your, oh yeah, I was going to show this one. I completely forgot about it too. this is another coverage example that I had that I've forgotten. It's like I always like doing translucent light, man. I just think it's like kind of cool because you can kind of capture some of that stuff for like these translucent objects and just have it cast like a stained glass window. It's like I mean, not a very complex material, but it's like oh, I did promise Lauren I'd show this off too. So the material editor now has this really cool like all of our other scenes, like you can get the scene preview settings and everything. So really kind of cool stuff. So again, with our coverage, this is like the floor thing that I had before. Sorry if I'm jumping around. This is the floor that I had before, where it's like this one has the max coverage, and then this one has the min coverage. And I just want to show again why this is so important to make sure that you're getting the proper coverage in the UV. Oh, not UV channel 1. There we go. So if we look here, and then flip between them, it's like, again, you can see the light map is like one's using it fully, one's using it sparsely. So I was like, it is, let's see here, let's disable eye annotation. You can see I can get really nice bake here. This one, I think I overrode the details, or the light map resolution, put a 1024. So I get really nice bake there. And then this one over here, same thing. It's using a 1024, but it doesn't get the same coverage. So it's like, again, you know, that UV chart, man, it's like it starts to look all pixelated. It doesn't look the best. So again, another really kind of thing to show off and kind of get the best you can.
Yeah, definitely take advantage of that space that you have.
Where possible. And it's like, again, depending on the complexity of your mesh, you may want to break it up into smaller chunks. So that way you can get that. And then we'll go back to world settings. So going back to our light maps here, we can see, just open up this one. Oh, actually, open up the high quality one. Disable that. And you can see there's much more going on here where everything's being packed in and whatnot. But it's like you can't really edit anything here. It's like our texture group automatically gets set to light map. I mean, you can go in here and you can set it in Everstream if you want to, but it's like that's a very manual process that I don't recommend for anyone. It's like I've seen some ArchViz people ask about that because texture streaming and things can usually cause, you know, it's like if they have a very complex scene and they're having to load all this texture memory in for light maps, it can take a second.
Yeah.
And they'll see a little bit of a pop before they wait for their load.
Gotcha.
But it's a much more manual process. But you can also do this right down here. So we've got pack, light map, and shadow maps. The default is 1024 by 1024 texture. So it's like all the objects that I have in the scene, it's like it's created these high quality and these low quality light maps. But it's, you know, it packs each one of those light map resolutions into this like little texture atlas that is used. So that way that we can get everything. So it's not each individual object is loading an individual texture every time, because that would just be ridiculous. So that's just a lot. So depending on your project, you may need to lower this, or you can raise it up to depending on what your needs are. It's not something I've ever really touched, but it is an option there for you. Another one is down here at the very bottom for general in-game stuff. But if you're doing like a visualization, maybe not targeting in-game, or you're targeting like a really, really high-end machine, we have this option down here for compressed light maps. If you disable that, can get rid of some artifacts that happen with the compression that happen for the textures. But it increases your memory budget for them by 4 times. So you know, if you're just doing a pretty scene and you just want to show something really awesome off, and you don't want the compression, I'd say for a screenshot, man, that's probably a really good thing to use, or maybe like a cinematic or something like that, where you can control how you're using it.
But not in general.
Yeah, not in general. I wouldn't recommend it, again, unless you have that memory budget for it. But
Right.
I don't know many people that are just like, oh man, I'm just gonna do this and have this large open world and just uncompressed light maps.
Right.
So, but yeah, that's I think that's pretty much it that I've got to show. Is there any questions that have kind of come in, or something I can show off that maybe I glossed over that someone?
So, excuse me. Someone was asking if you do like, pardon me,
light maps differently for voxelized style assets like trees. So like, how would you approach making light maps for objects like this?
Again, that kind of goes back. Like, I haven't personally made any for any trees, or any kind of stylized, like, really organic objects. Like, I've done some of my own, like, water fountains, and kind of like the one I had shown. And here, I'll pull that back over real quick. For those kind of things, I would do more, find a seam that makes sense and cut where possible to make sense, and then unwrap it in a way that you can kind of, like, again, this little center column here, it's a very rounded, kind of flowing object, but it's like we've kind of turned that into like a rectangle, just to make sure that we get that UV coverage. And I would kind of say the same thing for like trees and things like that. I've seen some of the ones like people just do a flat map before, and it's like, it's not always like, I guess, the best approach, but again, it just depends. Trees tend to have a lot more geometry as well.
True.
So, but then again, for those, it's like if I were doing something with them, it's like I typically want them to sway with the wind. I want them to flow a little bit. I don't necessarily want them to have a baked light map either. So it's like it just kind of
probably
depends.
tricks to do there too, as opposed to
There's probably someone that maybe on the forums could probably get a little more experience with it than I could. Like Kula, man, he does some really cool.
What was
Kula?
Kula?
Yeah,
I don't
I know
know
you've seen his stuff, like
Okay.
Koola.
All right.
Yeah, he's got some really awesome like lighting and ArchViz projects that he's done.
All right.
So
We'll have to dig him up. Someone asking for like a large open world game. What are some of your thoughts about using light maps efficiently?
So that would kind of go back to this whole thing, like with in general for large open world games, I wouldn't necessarily recommend light maps, at least not for everything. Just because at that point it's just becoming so large to manage, you're having to do these really long bake times. The larger your world becomes, like for instance, like the landscape demo that we have, I think without Swarm or anything like that, it's like it uses 24 gigs of RAM just to bake out everything. So, and that's not a very dynamic scene. It's not very detailed, but it's a really good example just to kind of show you these tiled or these landscape open world kind of things in a smaller way, like with that whole little kite fly and little glider and all that gameplay. But if I were going to do it, I would probably only bake lighting for my landscape. I would let that give me, you get volumetric light maps at that point. You get some kind of way to light dynamic objects. So then any of the foliage that I had, I would fall back on letting that not use a light map. And then too, like with those kind of worlds anyway, it's like you're going to use a directional light. You'll probably use a stationary you will use stationary if you have any static lighting. And then you would set the cascaded shadow distance. So at that point, you could also get away with really low light map resolutions for these farther objects because you don't need that high detail up close.
Right.
And you can let the cascaded shadow maps take over for anything that's within that like really close range to the camera. So.
Someone mentioned that in some of the landscapes they were building, they had directional lights coming from below, and it was creating a lot of light bleed.
Were they disabling them before they went below the?
Not sure. And
Okay.
so
Yeah, I would disable it. When I was on support, people would ask that a lot, and they weren't disabling they weren't taking the intensity of their light down. So they'd have a time of day system, and as soon as it would hit the horizon line and go below, they weren't taking it down to 0
Gotcha.
for intensity. So you tend to get that kind of bleed from underneath. But that's not really a light map issue either. I think that's just more a general lighting thing. So
Fair.
but
Do you have, this is kind of an open question, but do you have a ballpark performance cost of using extra UV sets for light maps as opposed to using only one for both textures and light maps?
no, I don't.
No? I'm sure that depends on a number of factors.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know performance cost. But in general, it's like I think I showed, like for instance, this asset here. When I originally opened up in Shadow or Showdown, it only had the one UV here laid out, and that's not a bad light map. It really isn't. It's I mean, it can be used. I mean, you can totally use Lightmaps Index 1 as channel 0 and have your texture and your lightmap UV be the same. So yeah, it's totally not a big deal. It's like all this one did was just repack it a little closer together.
Okay.
But
Do you have typical go-to resolution values for, or recommended values for like architectural visualization work?
not specifically for ArchViz. I just know that once you start getting to that, this kind of goes more into lighting rather than light. They kind of overlap a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to. I don't want to go too much and be like, hey, this is a lighting stream as well. But so with light mask settings, ArchViz people tend to tweak these quite a bit to get more fine detail. So having a good light map resolution there makes more sense for them than it would necessarily, because like you want to capture all of that detail. So it's like having a really low light map resolution while tweaking these settings probably won't give you, you know, the result you want. So you kind of have to tweak both to kind of coordinate with each other. If you're curious about it, again, the light map density view mode under optimization view modes, that's still a good way just to kind of give you a thing. So if you start using really high light map resolutions and you don't want to see like everything just be red, because that's all it would be if you start doing that. You can actually go under here to light map resolution adjustment, or no, not that one. Light map density. I'm just gonna say I never really used this one, but it can tweak things for the entire scene. That's why I kind of just didn't talk about it earlier. It's not a workflow that I've ever really used.
Gotcha.
Or know that really anyone has used. So we got ideal density. You can tweak these values to be whatever you want. So like 0.1, and you just say 0.2, and you can see that immediately becomes like everything is like on the everything is pretty much like, whoa, that's way over the budget I want. So your level designer may want to tweak these to be something more in line. You just kind of find a value that fits best for the project and the scale that you're kind of targeting. I don't have any specific values, but yeah, that's where I would really start personally. I guess can I show this thing from the marketplace that I wanted?
If you want.
Okay, yeah. So this is something that I used a long time ago, and it's like I still have used it occasionally. Ultima Light Map UE4 or all of that Light Mapper, but it's someone has made this really awesome little plugin. I do recommend it personally because I've used it. But what it can do is it can take your scene and it can grab everything and make them be the same density that you set. So it's kind of like you can take a scene right here and it's like everything's not quite, but you want them to be closer together, so that way it's like one thing doesn't look like it's getting like a really high light map resolution compared to something else. You can do that to kind of bring your, and this was using the Infinity Blade content from the marketplace as well. It's all free from Epic. So yeah,
Nice.
it's a nice little plugin that I've used on occasion. But
And then there's one more question someone is asking. Would you recommend making smaller models with light maps in mind? And so instead of, they're currently building a large bridge and the decking's about half a mile as one mesh. So
oh wow, like one half a mile real mile?
probably break that down anyway. But
I would start looking at modular workflow there.
well, that too.
Yeah, just because like there's a lot of things to consider with like something that's like, let's just say a real mile and just one mesh in your project. That thing never becomes unloaded because like when you start working with a modular workflow, at least you can rely on visibility culling and occlusion culling to kind of, hey, I'm outside of the range of this, I'm outside of its bounds, it's gone.
Right.
You know, it's not being loaded in memory and considered. And then that just kind of works more into your light map as well. So yeah, you can kind of
So
get
twofold there.
Yeah, because like something that's a mile long too, it's like you're probably gonna have to crank up the light map resolution just to support something that even looks remotely good with everything else. So it's probably best to
Chop it into pieces.
yeah, chop it into pieces and do something, and again, just make the seams where it makes sense. So it's like we again with like this little one here, it's like we've cut the front face off compared to the back that is all like one contiguous mesh. So you can kind of choose like where your seams are. And it's like if you drive across a bridge too, it's like it's always got like the little pieces like where they build modularly in real life. So
Right, that's true.
so you can kind of lay them out there. And again, remember like your texture UVs and your normal maps, man, those are gonna hide most flaws. So always target like as low as you can go in a forward, and still get like the general information.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any final questions, y'all? Seems like we're quieting it down. Give them a couple moments.
Okay.
But yeah, like all this stuff is always handy. And I remember when I first started learning about light maps versus UVs. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, I laid out my UVs. Why is it so angry at me? And then
Um,
you're like, oh, light maps work
Like-
completely different.
I guess real quick, so we have documentation on this. Hold on 1 second. I've got the busted hand, so it takes me a second to type.
That'll maybe shouldn't fall down the stairs.
This here. So we've got the UV unwrapping documentation. Oh, if I could type right.
There you go.
No.
Oh.
Why is it? It's only the forms.
Someone's asking
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
if they use BSP box walls, why do they have... I guess this is more of a lighting question, but why do they have light from the walls with a point light?
Hold on, what now?
Wait, hold on. If I use BSP box walls, why do I have light from the walls with a point light? I don't actually understand that question.
I'm not sure either. I do know that with the light map resolution that you can set there for the individual faces, it goes in reverse of what we are taught. So, for instance, if you type in something like, let's just say you type in like 256 for your light map resolution,
Yeah.
that works opposite of what you would think it does. It actually decreases the resolution of the mesh. So I think the default starts out at like 16. So if you lower it down to 8, it's going to be much more detailed than it would be at 16. So that might be some of the light bleed and issues. It's just something with like how the brushes work. I don't know all the technical background on it, but it's...
and then they... Oh, where'd it go? Have you talked about how to avoid light mat seams with a modular workflow? So like flat wall pieces and things like that.
yeah, I'm trying to get to
No, the documentation.
why cannot?
Is it hiding?
Well, it is, and it's like... hold on 1 second.
He's looking up something for you.
Yeah, sorry. I'm doing it off screen, so it's...
Secrets.
There we go. Okay. So this right now is like I'm actually in the process of rewriting this and adding the automatic light map workflow as a separate like how-to doc and overview as well. So this should be coming online, or I should be wrapping that up fairly soon, and then we'll hopefully get it out. So to kind of answer your question on that one, so we have many more examples in this doc as it stands right now, and they asked about like what a building facade.
Yeah, like flat walls and things.
Yeah, flat wall. So for instance, if we look at this one with this mesh here, I'm just gonna open a new tab because I can see it easier. You can see that it's got like all these little insets and all this little detail and everything kind of going across it, and then this is the textured version versus just like a lids only version, and then you can see the UV here. I didn't increase, but everything has been contiguously laid out and flattened, so it's like all these little details that were on that edge face that were little insets are just all flattened out into a way that kind of makes sense. So for something like this, we want to have like smooth lighting all the way across the mesh, so it just makes more sense to kind of flatten it out in that way. And for the areas that were like the windows, again, we've separated those out into their own little UV charts with their own padding around them, so that way they don't get any light bleed from these areas. Same for the tops and the bottoms here and the sides. And then there's also, we have another example of kind of like that down here towards the bottom, like with this really complex box. This kind of goes back to that flat mapping thing that I had talked about earlier, or some have tended to do. And it's like if we flat map and do everything, it's like each mesh has to have its own padding in between, so you lose a lot of you get a lot of wasted like UV space. Whereas, and you start to get errors that are kind of like this right here, where it's like you don't get the proper resolution that you would want, things look kind of the light bleed artifacts and whatnot. So it's like if we redo the mesh and everything is more of like contiguously laid out, you can do this, and you can just take much more advantage. So it's like we got all the sides here and then all 4 tops between the 2 boxes. And then you get a much smoother result. So it's like that kind of works better in that for you developing these kind of flat faces and areas like that.
Very cool.
So.
Thanks.
Yep.
The questions seem to have died down,
Okay.
and that's about all our time for today. So we're gonna wrap up. Thank you all for joining. I'm putting a survey in the chats right now. It's, let us know how we're doing. What kind of topics would you like to see in future live streams, things like that. So that's always super valuable to us. Again, thank you, Tim, for jumping on, talking about Lightmaps in.
Not a problem. Hopefully I covered everything
Super
you
handy,
wanted to know.
No, definitely. And feel free, if you have more questions or
Yeah.
you think of things later, if you go to the forum post where we announce the stream, we can always pop back in and keep an eye on those and see.
Yeah, I tend to keep an eye on them for like next couple days and just kind of see if anything comes in.
So if you think of something, jump over there. As always, sign up for or submit your projects for the NVIDIA Edge program. We have a documentation on that, on how to on how we'll be looking for those projects on various kinds of social. We always love seeing them, so make sure you submit and get yourself a swanky graphics card. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Always keep an eye on Facebook, Twitter, all those things. So
All the social medias.
yeah, all the medias. So take care, y'all, and we'll see you next week.
All right, see you.
Bye.